White House, Red House, White House. Red House falls, White House falls. All right? This symbolizes when the European moved the government from Philadelphia to Washington. That's what that symbolizes. The story, the Casablanca story. Are we clear? And then, of course, George Washington's monument is an obelisk, because he converted our estates into the states. Are we clear? Are we clear? So it's important for you to understand these things, to understand the shadow government that's operating now. Now, me and Dr. Naila, we had a lightweight conversation, and if you feel to interject, don't hesitate to interject. And it's important to understand this because you have to prepare for what's coming up. Keep going.
I just want to hold it.
You're ready to do a ventriloquist thing. Anyway, but this is important for you to understand that when the Red House fell, they set up the Global World Trust. Write that down. All right. Say, tell what to do. Say, write that down. All right. Glad you brought in, man. In the last, say, 20, 25 years, you've been hearing things like the HMOs, site drafts, then the UCCs, then financial statements, etc. UCC 1 financial statements, etc. Now they're trying to authenticate the birth certificate. Understand that all of those processes are connected to the Global World Trust. How many people knew that?
No.
I want y'all to look around the room, see, because I'm trying. I need to know where you are with this. Now, Heru raised his hand, but notice how no other hands are raised. But I guarantee you, there's a handful of these people in here that's either used UCCs, done financial statements, or trying to authenticate a birth certificate and don't know anything about the World Global Trust. Your claim is incompetent.
That's right.
And I'm going to reiterate this to make you understand when we opened up and I say, why is it some things we must be redundant with? Because it's just like getting in the boxing ring. Are we getting in the boxing ring? World. That shadow government is what's operating. And if you don't understand that that's what's in operation, you will get injured. Because it's already planned for you to get injured. Because you're under occupation. One of the hardest things to do to get into our people's heads is to get them to understand that they're under occupation. You know how people are always talking about racism and prejudice? Do you know why they're talking about racism and prejudice?
Amen.
When you hear our people always talking about racism and prejudice when it comes to our social, spiritual, economic problems in our communities, do you know why they're always saying that? There's a duplication of trainings that they did with little rats that they applied to humans. Because it's not really what's going on. And when you start arguing that, they already declared you incompetent. You just didn't know it. Because it's not what's happening. You're under European colonial occupation. Don't start talking racism and prejudice. It's a diversion argument. Are we clear? You're under European colonial occupation, shadow government. Are we clear?
Clear.
And back to what we was talking about earlier, what's happening is that different corporate entities are having to consolidate. And even after they consolidate, they'll still probably start being dismantled. Things are going on to stop things from just collapsing, but understand things will be dismantled. They will be disrupted. governments take place to prepare you. Guess what happens if you don't get prepared? You become part of the rubble. Because it's already planned. Meaning that whatever value you have, don't waste it on things that are not needed or not necessary. Put it into something that's a hard asset so that you can survive and your family can survive at least 6 months. Because you may not make it through that if you're one that didn't listen to what we've been telling you for these years. When we were coming down, the traffic was kind of jammed a little bit. Take these short notes, these like bullet points. George Washington was the 9th president and not the first. So you don't get it twisted. All right? All right. George Washington is the praetor who converted the Moorish estates into the corporate states under the secret treaty of Verona for European operations on the land. Are we clear? Praetor, that's AE with an AE. Praetor. Praetor is what they call the presidents, the Roman praetors.
You repeat it?
P-R-A.
No. What you just said about George Washington.
Oh, George Washington, well, these are things that you need to remember. So write them down if you need to. Was the 9th president and not the first. And part of what I'm telling you, you just try to put it to memory. They tell you that because they want to lock you out of examining the administrations that preceded him. Because it'll start tying you back to some keys that'll take you back to true history. That's why you're given that as a reference point. You know how they start you off in the middle race and you don't understand what the beginning line is? And it never dawns on you that you've been played. You understand? Now remember, let's go through the scenario again, and then feel free to talk too, all right? 1492, as the emirate fell in Granada, that's in Andalus, that's later, not at that time, later called Spain. Are we clear? All right. It is one of the major events in the fall of the Moorish empires. As the emirate fell in Granada, that's in Andalus, that's later, not at that time, later called Spain. Are we clear? All right. It is one of the major events in the fall of the Moorish Empire. It's not complete. It's one of the major events. And therefore that date, 1492, is used historically among scholars as the turning point, or what you call the axis year, between the old world and the new world. So when they talk about after 1492, they're talking new world. 1492 back, they're talking old world. Old world is you. New world is European colonial operations, the shadow government. It's not solidly established yet, but that's what you need to understand, all right? So, it is not unlike we taking you and sitting you over here and telling you somebody else is your mother. And after a couple years, you believe it, and that's what's happening. And everybody else believes it. Meanwhile, you're not heritable because you're not tied to your real mother. But you don't know that. This is exactly what's happening to our people. Exactly, in fact. And this is where you get parens patriae that is used in the United States corporation government in relationship to 14th Amendment persons. Except instead of the mother, it is dealing with the father, being the Pope of Rome, who's imitating the Pharaoh Ptah of Egypt. And the substitute for the Christ degree on the spiritual plane. Thus, claiming to be God on earth So when you go home, look in your Bible, read 1st and 2nd Thessalonians. I won't go through it. I'm just giving you reference points so that you can understand the spiritual reflection into the politics that's operative. So that you don't get the idea that what people keep calling spiritual and that the politics have no relationship. They absolutely have tons of relationship. Are we clear? And it's not that you haven't been told these things, it's that it hasn't been explained to you. Do you understand? In other words, people usually use the information to spook you up and take your finance rather than tell you the Kabbalistic origin of those books, and that those books are actually astrological projections so that you can prepare for the roadblocks that are put in your way. That's what's called prophecy. Prophecy is really astrological projections. If you didn't know it now. So it ain't about being spooky, so don't get spooked about it. Are we clear? Yeah.
Astrological projections.
The Bible is an astrology book. And it's not their book, it's yours. So don't look at it like, oh, it's a European. No, he tampered with it, but it still is not his book. Are we clear? All right. So don't get this idea. See, this is another trap too. Like when you get our people and they get into different, what they're calling different religions, really only one religion, but people get into what they call different religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and then they get into multiple different sects and demonations. Demon, keep this in mind because these are codes. Right? Yeah. One of the problems that we have too is that the masses have no idea that there really is not and never has been separation of church and state. The states are the corporate entities of the church, belongs to the Jesuits. You know when you talk about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the movie, they're really talking about Jekyll Island, Georgia. That's where they created the shadow government. Are we clear? And it's important for you to understand this because you're under psychic attack and they're getting ready to accelerate their economic attack. Knowing this, just keep your heads up. Y'all have known this for a while. They intend to exercise this, so don't think that they're not going to. Even though there's some interventions that are taking place, interventions are taking place. But it can, how do you say, slow down the hemorrhaging, can't stop it. In other words, you have to take some responsibility in this. Translation, save yourselves. Physicians, heal yourselves. All those different statements, many of the statements that you've heard people propose that Jesus said were actually for you. Jesus is a password. Jesus actually is a code for justice. And so Jesus is missing, justice is missing. Jesus was hung on the cross, justice was hung on the cross. And so justice must be resurrected.
SMS
but it must be resurrected in you. And thus you must have the knowledge of what killed you. But you weren't really dead. This is why you'll see If you travel the country and you see where they may have oil paintings of George Washington closing the lodge, you see him closing the lodge like this. Whoa. Which means we're not dead. They buried us. They struck us in the head.